seems to me. Language depends on being, not being on language. Of course, he poses this radical question at the end of the meditation that I think is crucial, right? Where is the absolutely initial point of being? Because if all this does is say, if we have a set, then we can generate these other sets to the axiom of separation, then he's going to have to say, so where do we get that initial set? How on earth do we get that initial existence? Of course, it's going to have to be axiomatically presupposed, we know that, but there's more to the story than that, and that's what the next two meditations deal with.
Actually, I'm gonna cheat here. I'm gonna take this, plug it in here. This is what I was talking about the axiom of extensionality, and this is just a further clarification.
Okay.
Which is you can presuppose an extensional set, which is to say, sorry, is this getting too big ahead? So the axiom of extensionality says that for every gamma that is an element of alpha, if and only if gamma is an element of beta, right? So that means it has to be both ways.
Right.
It can't just be gamma is an element of alpha. Alpha or gamma also needs to be an element of beta. So both of these
Mutual implies.
yeah.
It's
So
equivalence.
yeah. So if and only if, then right. Therefore, A is equivalent to B.
They're exactly the same.
Right. But what you can do is you could have an extensionally equal set that also is separatable out.
Right.
Right, so if all of your gammas that are an element of A, actually, I should probably use B.
But that's right.
Yeah, whatever. But the point is, this sort of separation, what you shouldn't think is that A, therefore, has to be a bigger set than G.
Right.
Right, because G and A could extensionally be the same set.
Right.
This is, again, that I would have to
Right.
reform that. I was doing it on the fly. Right, so again, so that's what the point I was trying to drive home,
Right.
is that extensionality doesn't entail, unlike Frege, right, that this set is something larger, right? Because this formulation implies that B must be larger than G because it's created out of the function, the language of of creating G.
Is this the point of why being is anterior to language?
Yes.
So and this is what he's going to deal with in meditation 5. And so so a point of clarification to make sure we're on the same page here.
Right.
It's not necessary to have this axiom in order to formulate this axiom.
Right, exactly.
But the two have to be together in set theory to get anywhere.
Right.
So we can talk about this and its difference from here without having to go through extensionality. But you can't get axiomatic set theory without extensionality because then you can't end up with a unique set.
Right, and the only reason, sorry, I guess is me kind of being clarified, is this is different from the axiom of replacement, which is what I think you thought I was talking about.
Yeah, sorry, you're right.
No, I just wanted to clarify
you're right,
for the folks at
You're
home.
right, thanks. I was conflating extensionality and replacement. Thank you. So that's meditation 3. I think we can move on. At least I probably have to, because I've got to bail within about 45 minutes here. So meditation 4, again, this question he poses at the end of meditation 3 is crucial, right? This only presupposes that if there is some set, then language can separate out some subset of that. But it doesn't presuppose that there is some such set. And that's the question, where are we going to get this A, this alpha? And that's what he's going to be doing with meditation 4 and 5, really. So where do we get that? And here, again, I think in some ways he's already spelled this out in his handling of Plato. The answer is it's the pure nomination. It's the nothing. Which is why this is called the void, the proper name of being. The void is the proper name of being, the pure nomination, this minimal link between being and non-being. Pages 52 and 53, just a quick point on this, right? The idea is that if we've got, so we've got to go back to our first formulations of this. We've got being an appearance like this. We're always on this side of the line, right? We're all on the same page there, going back to the way we were talking about meditation 1. The trick is that this is the structured situation. But the structure, in order to be structured, has to have been structured by something outside of the structure. That's a very common Derridian point, if you will, right? Any kind of structure implies that there's something outside of it. I mean, the Lacanian point too. The structure of masculine thought, masculine logic. So this idea that this is structured, it bears within it a kind of shadow or hint, an errant shadow or hint, that there's something in excess of it. But what is that excess? And there's nothing. And there's a kind of fun point going on here, right? Nothing is in excess of this structure. But that's precisely the point, and that's what Plato allows us to see when he points out this minimal link. The nothing is. The nothing is. It's not that the nothing is no thing. The nothing is in being, and nothing in fact is the proper name of being itself. It sounds like a really creative play on words that he's doing, right? But it is a crucial point. And it's a kind of Heideggerian point. In Being and Time for Heidegger, it's when you realize your death that you recognize the possibility of totality rupturing itself. But when he goes on later in his career, especially in Was ist Metaphysik, in What is Metaphysics, Heidegger goes on to say it's actually in the moment of boredom that you recognize nothingness. And it's a kind of similar point to what Badiou is pointing out here. There's a moment in which you recognize that the totality of your experience is a totality that has to be structured by the something that is nothing outside of it. So that for Heidegger, in a moment of boredom, you recognize the nothing as such. There's something similar going on here, though it's not existential by any means. So,
Just really quick, so problem 52, any situation seized in its immanence thus reverses the inaugural axiom of our entire procedure. It states that the one is and the pure multiple inconsistency is not. This is entirely natural because an indeterminate situation not being the presentation necessarily identifies being with what is presentable, thus the possibility of the one.
right, we're always over here. Right? And being always over here, we naturally, if you will, think of what we see as being.
So is this to say that we're always in a structured situation?
Yeah, and to say that when you're not doing ontology, you don't think of the presentation at all. Right? In some sense, I mean, using the language of natural is probably a good way of doing it in the Husserlian sense, right? The natural world is the world where you don't thematize the world. You're not trying to think about, or the Heideggerian hammer, right? I don't think about the makeup of this hammer while I'm hammering. Something like that, right? If someone were to ask me in that moment, is that hammer? Of course it is, right?
Right.
But that's actually an inconsistent way of talking about consistency. So I think that's all he's trying to point out there.
And then going over to 53, it is therefore vertical with a D.
Yeah, veridical.
Vertical, sorry. That inside, he says he's going to talk about later, but that inside what a situation establishes as a form of knowledge, being is being in the possibility of the one. It is Leibniz's thesis, what is not a being is not a being, which literally governs the immanence of a situation and its horizon of veridity, is the thesis of the law.
Okay.
And I'm basically asking for translation.
I'm reading the very beginning of the meditation because he's setting up a situation. So take any situation in particular, it's been said that its structure splits the multiple which is presented there into consistency and inconsistency, however inconsistency is not actually presented as such, and so on. Okay, so it's therefore veridical that inside what a situation establishes as a form of knowledge, being is being in the possibility of the one, is Leibniz's thesis, which literally governs the immanence of a situation, its horizon of verity. It is a thesis of the law. Again, I think he's just restating what he's just stated at the bottom of the previous page. The same point. Badiou is actually really nice, I think, to you as you read Being an Event. He says the same thing 4, 5, 6, 7 times before moving on. My wife and I read this whole book out loud once together, right? And there are times where she's like, "What is he saying there?" I'm like, "He's saying the same thing he just said." She's like, he's gotta stop doing that. I keep thinking he's moving on to the next point.
Well, I mean, there is a little bit of qualification, right?
Right.
What's introduced is the notion of veridical, which
Vertical, which he's not going to work through in detail till.
till 31.
Right.
But it's also, and he also, right, links this to Leibniz. As far as I understand it, right, it's that link to Leibniz's law.
Right.
Leibniz's law, right, if the properties of one object are completely identical to the properties of another object, then they are the same object. Which is to say, right, if it's not an object, right, which is distinguishable, individuated, able to be separated out, it's not an object or being.
Yeah, and when would he put this, and this, like Greg mentioned, he's not going to deal with the concept of veridicity until quite a bit later in the book, but what he means by veridical is it's something that can be known at the level of knowledge, if you will, the encyclopedia of knowledge.